Well, hello out there. How's everybody doing tonight? Anybody out there? Hi. Cool. So this is an experiment I'm trying out. This is a video where basically I'm just going to talk about some of my work and tell you a little bit about how I think about the work. I call this self-critique when you spend a lot of time alone in your studio and you're trying to figure out just how to make better art. I'm always thinking about how the different pieces relate to each other and how they relate to the whole body of work and your career as an artist. So I thought if I just talked about it in a video, maybe people would find it interesting, maybe they'd find it helpful. So if you like this, I'll do a series of these. We could call this little experiment episode 1. And I just decided that critique, the art of self-critique, would be a good name for it because that's what I do to try to make better work, to try to make a better career as an artist. So I thought as a good intro it would be finding your authentic voice. So I titled this, we're recording this live, I'll repost it after it's recorded, but I titled this The Art of Self-Critique, Finding Your Authentic Voice. Because whether that's in art or some other part of your life, authenticity and finding how to be more authentic seems to be a worthy goal. So that's something I really try to do in my art, is let the art be whatever it needs to be. So I thought I'd walk you through the process of how I think about that when I'm making pottery. This is all a bunch of new pottery that just came out of the kiln, and there's a couple old pots too that I'll talk about. So I'll do some Q&A at the end, but in the meantime, I just want to talk about the pots. I started making pots in high school, and I was just copying things. That's kind of how you learn as a potter. You just copy things over and over again. And then you get to college and you do this thing called critique, where you just look at the pots. You pick up the pots, you look at your pots and other people's pots, and you try to figure out what's good and what's bad about something like a coffee mug. And so, again, these just came out of the kiln, so I'm trying to figure out this new work and trying to see how I feel about it. It has a name, I call it Nuka Cobalt, and that's just based off the glaze name. The glaze is called a Nuka glaze, and cobalt is something that comes out of the ground. It makes blue. In porcelain, you'll see cobalt. In blue and white pottery is really common all over the world. But it's the same basic materials. So I learned how to do this glaze chemistry in high school. That was like 14 years ago. And then in college, you just kind of keep trying to figure out why you're doing things. So I spent 4 years in college trying to develop my artistic voice, and what does that even mean? So I got really obsessed with this book called A Potter's Book, and the first chapter, it's called Towards a Standard. He's talking about towards a standard of quality in your artwork. And that book was written after this guy he spent 33 years being a potter. It was written in 1940. So he was a potter all through First World War, into the Second World War in Great Britain. He was just making pots, kind of a silly thing to do. And Towards a Standard, the opening of this big, thick book about how to be a potter, was all about what makes a good pot, what makes a bad pot. And there's a lot of gray area, of course, but authenticity is the number one thing. Because everything about clay communicates something. Whether it's these marks here from your fingers, or the textures, like there's little black spots in here. Those are in the clay and they're bleeding out. You don't have to have those. You could have porcelain that doesn't have any of that. But what's important is that it mixes well with the art. These lines dripping down, those need to mix well with these lines that are moving up and down. There's 2 different lines here in the color. The lines on the side of the bowl, that this one feels kind of like egg-shaped. It feels kind of like, I put some soup in there and sit with it in my lap, as opposed to a bowl like this where it's about the same size, same color palette, same drips, same quality of drips, but the funky shape is not something that you might necessarily want to eat or drink from right at the beginning. But it still works. It's a functional pot. So all those things, this has a lot more of it's just a lot more of a statement when it's sitting in most people's homes. And most of these are going to get shipped off to people's homes. So that's how we critique. So I think of critiquing as like asking questions and then just getting to work. Those two things. Just ask a lot of questions and then just get back to work. For me, it's asking questions about the pots. Which one of these do I like better? Which one of these glazed palettes seems to speak to me more? And asking why. And then you can get too into the why, and then it starts to feel a little bit like a little too philosophical, and then you just get back to work. So that's the process I used all through college to tell how is a pot good or bad, because these things we surround ourselves with, there are pots that are good or bad, and it's hard to know why. What makes something good or bad? Something that you could just get at a thrift store, or something you get at a big box store, or something you buy at an art festival or a farmer's market because someone made it with their hands, versus something in a gallery. All those things have different quality levels. And what's important is that they're authentic. There's a story I wanted to tell. It's easy to find on the internet. I heard it. You can find it just by Google searching, but it's by this guy Alan Watts. It's the story of the Chinese farmer, and it just reminds me of making pots. Farming and pottery, farming and potting, they seem like they have a lot of parallels. But because pottery, it just literally comes out of the ground, so it's very natural. And so you could replace potter with farmer in a different way. But anyways, the story goes that this farmer, his horse ran away one day, and all the townspeople came up and said, "Oh, isn't that terrible? Your horse ran away." And he said, "Maybe." And then the horse came back the next day with 6 more horses that just showed up, wild horses. And all the townspeople came and they said, "That's great, you have 6 horses now." And he said, "Maybe." And then one of his sons was trying to ride the horse and trying to tame this wild horse. And he fell off, broke his leg. And everyone came to him and said, "Oh, your son broke his leg, that's terrible." And he said, "Maybe." And the next day, the military came and wanted to take his son away to war, the conscription, or they came and were signing up for the draft, and his son couldn't go because he had a broken leg. And everyone, all his friends and family were like, "That's so great, your son doesn't have to go to war." And he said, "Maybe." And so there's really nothing that's good or bad in the universe. That's what the idea, it's just an idea, an example of how things are good and bad, but it's impossible to tell the outcome of something good or the outcome of something bad. When you open a kiln, it's the same thing. This is a lot of the recent pottery. There's a lot of this bubbling. You can't really see it there. That drives me nuts. Can you see that? Absolutely nuts. But the color is perfect. This surface is a little waxy. It's not completely glossy. The shape is perfect. There's no cracks. So everything about the pottery process, there's I'm going to like it, I'm not going to like it. This was really rough when it came out of the kiln. That's going to scratch someone's table. But I had to sand that down. Or someone from our team had to sand it down. We had to hire people to help in order to make enough of these to get them out into the world. So this is a nice pot from about 2 years ago, I think. It still has the bubbling. In a couple areas over the green, it's consistently happening. And can you notice the difference between 1 year, 2 years ago, and a brand new piece? Nearly everything is identical in these 2 pots, but the depth of the glaze makes a huge difference. That's something you can feel in your gut. For me, that's the difference between being ready to let a pot go into the world right away, or having to keep a pot and realizing that okay, this one speaks to me. I've had this pot around. This is one of my jewels that I've kept for years. And my dream is to have art in the Museum of American Art in Washington, D.C., or the Smithsonian someday. And if I'm going to do that, I need to keep pieces around that are worthy of a place like that. And just to even think and have a goal and aspire to something like that, you know, it kind of gives me a weird feeling in my stomach, like you shouldn't say it. But if you truly believe, like I've been to these places and I've seen the art there, and I know the history of the art. If you truly believe that you could make something that could end up there, then part of getting it there is just is this art of self-critique and being honest and being authentic about that being a goal. I call these cosmic mugs, but it's amazing that they just came out of the exact same process as something that doesn't have anything to do with outer space or the universe. This is essentially the reverse of these color schemes. I had a black glaze, and I put it on the white one, it turned blue. And then I didn't dip the white one first, I dipped the black one, and it turned black, and a different shades of blue when you reversed the color schemes, and it changed to a completely different idea, something that I had to force onto it. Like, okay, there are these photos from the Hubble Space Telescope, and I want to make a link there, but all I have are these 2 to 3 glazes, these 2 glazes, and then the cobalt and the copper. How do I make something that really is inspired by outer space and still be authentic with it? You just need to experiment. You need to do those 2 things I mentioned. You need to ask a lot of questions. How do I manipulate these materials to make these colors? And then you need to get back to work. So just ask questions and get to work. And that's a great process I found for finding your authentic voice. Even if you don't quite understand it, and even if it changes over time. You know, this turned into 2 color palettes, and the green and this darker blue, they didn't look good together on the same mug. That came out of critique. Just looking at it and feeling it in your gut, whether or not you enjoy that. There's this artist I wanted to bring up because he has a great article. His name's Simon Levin. He's a potter too, and the article's called Critical Care: The Art of Self-Critique. So he kind of inspired a lot of my work. I've talked to him on the phone. When I was in college, I talked to him about how he's making a living as an artist. And he told me a lot of things, but he referred me to this article that he wrote and got published, and he had something called the suck factor. He said, how much could a pot suck? You make these things and you start out and they really suck. They're really not very good. I mean, when I was in high school, I made like 100 pots and they were terrible. They were just really bad. You just have to make a lot of pots. He said, okay, a pot could suck all the way around. If you're making something, it could just be really bad all the way around. When you're getting started, they're just too heavy, they're too thick, they're kind of ugly. So he said it could suck 360 degrees. He said, when I started, my pot sucked about 350 degrees. And then he went to college and graduate school. I wrote it down here. He said they sucked about 200 degrees in graduate school because I had so many outside influences. And then when he's built his own pottery studio, when he became a professional artist, they only sucked about 80 degrees. The suck factor dropped. And he's got this little graph. And I thought that was interesting because if we're talking about finding your authentic voice as an artist or in your career, as a person, the outside influences, when he was starting out, they really distracted him. And he was drawn to all those outside influences, but it wasn't until he turned inward out of school, out of graduate school for art. That's like a lot of school. And started to just do his own thing. Off in the woods, making pottery. Once he started to do that, his pots got better. The suck factor dropped. They, objectively, just looking at his art, in his studio, self-critiquing it, the work improved. You can feel it in your gut when the work starts to improve. I saw this movie I really enjoyed recently. It's called In Search of Greatness. I'm not done with it, but it reminded me of those two things. Okay, keep asking questions, keep making art. They interviewed a lot of people. People are at the top of their field, like Wayne Gretzky, Venus and Serena Williams, the two tennis players, and they emailed them, or sorry, they interviewed them and they studied them and they cited a bunch of studies because these are the masters of their worlds, and they said that they had these two qualities: a rage to master, just really intensity about mastering something, to mastery, and the ability to learn really quickly. And I think that's really important when you get to higher levels, but when you're starting out, you really don't need to learn that quickly. You can just kind of ask a lot of questions and get to work. And clay, if any of you have ever tried to make anything out of clay, it's something you can get obsessed with it. They call it getting bit by the clay bug. You can get just totally like in the zone, on the wheel, kind of like playing a video game. You get obsessed with a video game. And then as you start to like do it more and more and start to ask questions, you can kind of, the thing about clay and art is you don't really lose that. You can keep that rage to really want to master it. This one is one of the jewels, one of the newest ones. I call them jewels because they're mine. They're my jewels. I just put them in a box and I never sell them because they're important enough to keep around. This one is inspired by the planet Neptune. It's the same combination of these two glazes that I started experimenting with years ago in a different, just a different combination of the technical materials. It was hanging like this in a kiln. It's really hard to hang stuff. So to me, to figure out this equation of how to make it dry right there and comfortable, but have a horizontal motion, this was so incredibly difficult for me that I know it's worthy of something better than just putting it on the website with a price on it. I'm not done figuring this out. And it's driving that really like, okay, I want to keep working. It keeps me really, really enthusiastic, kind of like when you're first starting out. You need to keep that as you get to higher levels too. Even if you're tempted to just sell it and make money, because people will start, once you start to actually make a living doing what you love, the whole world is going to conspire against you to do what they want you to do. It comes in the form of commissions, gallery invitations to, it seems like really good opportunities, and it's really important to again, turn inward. And I found that when you turn inward, the suck factor drops. How much your pots suck. It just, finding your authentic voice is important at every single level. So this one, I want to move forward from here. I don't know about this nipple here. Feels a little boobish. Feels a little less like a planet. Might be a little distracting there. It's closest I get to nudes right here. But that might be a little distracting. It doesn't remind me of the planet Neptune, and that's what inspired this. So to fit with my body of work, I might need to thin up the glaze a little bit. So there's not this one distraction. Maybe there's 3 drips. Maybe I need to look more at Neptune and see what the surface of the planet is. Email a scientist. What's important is that you go about it honestly, with authenticity. There are a couple more quotes I want to share with you guys. Are you enjoying this? Are you liking this or not? I'm going to keep talking either way. Well, let's just keep talking about the pots. Who needs a script? This pot has blue tape on it. Cool, thank you. We're recording live right now, and I'll repost the video when it's done. This piece of tape I put on the pots when there's a problem. After everything is fired and finished and there's a problem with the pottery, I'll put the blue tape on it. Well, I'll either smash it, or we will diagnose what's wrong with it and decide whether or not to smash it or keep it in the world. Because these things, pieces of pottery, you can go into a museum and see a piece of pottery from 5,000 years ago. These things could last forever. For basically much longer than we're going to be around. So this one has a crack. It's got a pretty massive crack. That's a problem. That's called an S crack. It's common. It happens in at least 10% of my work on average. But again, there's pros and cons to every part of the artistic process. I could smash this one. The glaze is just gorgeous. I enjoy how it drips. It just feels really intuitively like it's like a painting that feels really nice. I love how these feel. They feel kind of messy, but it's still, this was from, I think I was holding it in my left hand here when I dipped it because my finger marks line up, and it feels really comfortable, and the color of the clay matches the color of the glaze. There's a lot of things as we critique it that are going very well, except for that crack. It doesn't go all the way through. This will still hold a cup of coffee. You don't need to use it as something like a paintbrush holder because it will function just fine as a coffee mug. I know that after making 20,000 pieces of pottery. But do you want something with a huge crack across your signature existing in the world for centuries to come? That's a big question. Do I sell this for $50 or $100 or discount it, sell it for $40 just to help pay rent, which is important, which you need to do if you're going to make a living as a professional? Or do you smash it? Because in college I was taught to smash it. So there's that process again. Ask a lot of questions and get back to work. My philosophy on it, and I just try to be authentic about this, is to sell it, is to let it exist in the world because I make a living this way, and that's also part of the story that maybe in 100 years someone will be able to learn if they ever watch this video and realize that we've all decided on this capitalist system, and I would rather someone enjoy all the fantastic qualities about this for hundreds of years, even though there's something that any potter, any ceramic artist would say, oh, you should probably smash that because you know that you can do better. And they're right. There's always that yin and a yang. There's things that are good, things that are bad, and our perception is all we really have control over. This pot has the same thing, has a crack right there. Okay, that happened during the drying process, a little uneven from when I formed this clay on the wheel. But look at the sides. Look at the sides of this kind of bowl or vase that's obviously inspired by our moon and maybe other moons. These are textures that kind of look like the moons around Jupiter or Saturn. The moon Europa has a lot of ice. There's also my fingerprints there. Inside, you're not quite able to see, but if I put a flashlight on the inside, it lights up. There's colors that kind of look like a spinning galaxy on the inside, all different colors. But it has that flaw. There's this idea where artists will cover things in gold. There's a Japanese word for it that I'm not remembering, and it's embellishing broken pots with gold. Raku pottery used to be repaired that way too. There's probably a whole tradition of that. And the idea is that something is more beautiful for having been broken, and that's the reason for embellishing it with gold. These marks actually speak about something being handmade and being kept because of that. Do we need to embellish it with gold just for that? I'm not sure. This pot I will, because the plan is to embellish it with gold because it's not something that's going to go in and out of a dishwasher. This is a higher end art piece. It's most likely going to sit. It's not going to be scrubbed with a brush or a sponge, which is how we treat ceramics that are in our daily lives, how we need to. This mug, I'm not going to do that because this is going to go in and out of dishwashers after I'm dead. So that seems less authentic to me. The authenticity of trying to cover something with gold that in 21st century America is going to get scrubbed with a sponge. This is not going to go end up in a gallery or a museum or just sit. Someone is going to use this. They're going to clean this. They're going to stain it with coffee. So it seems less authentic to me to cover something like that with gold than it does a larger piece like this. Well, these are the newest pots. These are the things I'm thinking about when I think about making new work. The gallery of our lives, I like that. So that's about all I have. I guess I could read a couple more quotes that have been inspiring the work. When I say the work, it's the pottery and it's the business of being an artist. a lot of artists don't really think very much about the business side of things, or they try to keep it separate from the artistic side of things. Two sides of different brains, of the same brain. Left brain logical, right brain artistic. We have one brain. So I don't shy away from the fact that the art of business and the art of crafting can be treated with the same amount of respect and reverence. People have sales and marketing. We get a little nervous today when we hear those words because no one wants to be sold to. But you can treat those things with reverence and respect. We've all decided we live in a capitalist society. So I guess I don't share a lot of views that you can treat business and art with the same respect. But I believe that's important to being authentic. If you're gonna go down that path, a lot of artists will they'll teach, they'll be a weekend warrior, and they'll have a 9-to-5 job where they show up, they leave, and their hobbies are what they pour themselves into, and that's great too. And pottery can be that. It can be a hobby. It can be a hobby that gives your life a lot of meaning, and that's great too. I like this quote just because it talks about the universe, but it says, and I'm into a lot of outer space ideas lately, and outer space inspired by nature, but nature not on planet Earth. This quote says, "Effectiveness is doing the things that get you closer to your goals. Efficiency is performing any given task, whether it's important or not, in the most economical manner possible. Being efficient without regard to effectiveness is the default mode of the universe." That quote was by Tim Ferriss in one of his books. And it's just so often we sit down to make work, sit down to make art, sit down to check our email, and we're just going through the motions. We can do that a lot in life. And we're being really efficient with how I could sit down and over, last holiday season I made about 100 of these things. They take a long time to make. But was that getting us closer to our goals? Was that getting me closer to wanting to make a living by being a sculptor someday? I want to do bigger things. My goal is to make more sculpture. Is just sitting down and doing the same thing over and over again, is that helping? Well, since it's the default mode of the universe, maybe that's the most authentic thing to do, is to sometimes you have to sit down, you have to check your email every Monday. You have to just, you have to hammer through those. Another quote I really like, this relates a little more to business than art, but like I said, I see them as two sides of different coins. Albert Einstein, I think he was the one that said that art and science are two sides of the same coin. They both embrace mystery and a search for truth. I think a lot about doing business in our world should be, it normally isn't, but it should be about a search for truth. It should be about creating something beautiful. And so this is a business book that my mom actually recommended it to me, but I've heard Ariana Huffington of the Huffington Post recommend it. I've heard Seth Godin recommend it. And this is a quote from the book. It's called The Go-Giver, is the name of the book. The first question should be, does it serve? Does it add value to others? If the answer to that question is yes, then you can go ahead and ask, does it make money? But the point isn't to have them pay you more, it's to give more. You give, give, give. Why? Because you love to. It's not a strategy, it's a way of life. And when you do, then very, very profitable things begin to happen. To me, that speaks to all the ways that we've grown into making a living, that I've grown into making a living, now my fiance, that both of us do this full time. And that we've built a small company and a business that grows like a tree, that grows over time. I'm not sure who said this, but one of the best ways to market your work is to give it away for free. With art, that's even more powerful because these things, they can feel like your babies. they can feel like you birthed these things into the world. This pot came out of the kiln a few days ago, and I don't know if this one is sold yet. I know a couple of these are, because the way things sell on the internet is someone double clicks, and then you take a day or two and you put them in a box and you take them to the post office and never see them again. We do that with thousands of pots every single year. And we've done so many giveaways every single month, increasingly as this Cherico pottery has grown like a tree. We've made more fruit, and a lot of that fruit we've dropped onto the ground for free. That's maybe not the best analogy, but we do giveaways. Every month we'll take maybe $1,000, maybe $500 or $2,000 worth of pottery. The retail value for a bowl like this is probably a couple $100 today, maybe less than that. And I'll give it away. I'll put it on our website, and we'll run a contest, and then someone will win, and they'll win 1 or 2 or 3 pieces, or 3 people will win them. And that has literally been the most enthusiasm I've received in an email. It's when people get stuff for free. I've done it where if they buy a pot, then one of the 10 people who bought a pot will get a moon mug. That happened last month. And the person who got this moon mug was already into the art because they were supporting it. They were buying a cosmic mug, and they got the moon mug, and they gifted it out. So it created a ripple of kindness because they ended up gifting that. That's happened numerous times. Or somebody who can't afford a pot, who can't afford one of these intricate pots that take so long to make, they'll get it totally free. They'll get an email on something that they know they can't afford. Someone on fixed income. We have a lot of our fans who are on fixed income. A lot of veterans have reached out and say they enjoy learning about pottery because it's very therapeutic, because it's art. But they couldn't afford something because art in our society isn't something that helps us survive every day. So stories like that, and giving things away. Sure, you could call it a marketing strategy, but it's more than that. To me, it has a lot more reverence. And the inside of that, again, relates to the outside of these. Any questions? If not, I think I'll just leave you with a parting thought. If you like these videos, let me know. I'll read all the comments. Maybe I'll turn this into a series. This one was about authenticity. I've got a lot more themes I'm thinking about when I make work. This was 1 month worth of pottery, and these are just some of the best pots. We're looking at around 20 pots here, and about 200 came out of the kiln so far. So this is just a very small selection of what's going out into the world. And if you like these videos, I'd like to do another one next month when all the pottery comes out. I want to sit and talk about it. Authenticity was the first theme, and I'd like to hear from you. If you think of any questions, put them in the video comments about what's helped you be a little more authentic, whether it's in your life or something in your business. I'd just like to hear about that. Any other questions out there before I sign off? We're recording this live. Packing for NCECA. NCECA stands for the National Council on Education of the Ceramic Arts. It's had a huge impact on my life. About 5,000 potters and sculptors and clay people get together and hang out in a big city once a year. It's been going on for over 50 years. No, not packing for NCECA, packing light. Gonna show up just with my body. We're just gonna go, Sienna, my fiance, and I are gonna go just to experience 5,000 potters and sculptors in a city, and everyone brings work. We're not exhibiting this year though. We're going to experience it. So we're gonna go with our camera, our big old digital device, and soak up the inspiration. Gonna research some tools, research some maybe some possible residency or workshop opportunities in the future to go to and learn, or to go to teach. But we won't be exhibiting. We're turning inward and focused more on making and then sending these pots to people's homes, as opposed to hauling them around the country. Any other pottery questions? Well, thanks for watching, and hope to see you in the next video. So, have a good one. Bye-bye.